Okay, so get ready because we are diving headfirst into the world of Pride and Prejudice. You sent over all these scenes from this classic, and I'll admit, even I get a little intimidated, like cracking open this book for the first time again, but
Yeah.
that's why we're here to dig into those good parts. Drama, romance, and all that witty social commentary Austen is famous for.
And believe me, Austen always has something going on underneath the surface.
Yeah.
The way she gets to those universal truths about people, how we deal with relationships and those little social games we play, it's what makes her work still matter so much today.
Totally. We're in rural England, right? The Bennet family is in a bit of a state. They have can you believe it? 5 unmarried daughters.
Let's just say marrying off these daughters is kind of her whole deal. And Austen, bless her heart, she uses Mrs. Bennet to make fun of the crazy pressure on women back then. Think about it. A good marriage wasn't just love. It was survival. Especially because women couldn't really make their own money back then.
It's like she's trying to win a prize for, like, most eligible daughters, right? And Mr. Bingley, our eligible bachelor, is the trophy. The second he shows up, Mrs. Bennet is already planning the wedding.
Oh, totally. Remember when she says that thing like, what a fine thing for our girls. It's like you can practically hear her picking out flower arrangements. It's like Mr. Bingley is just a way to get a really good marriage contract.
And she goes all out, like pushing her husband to go see Bingley first and making sure her daughters are always around him.
And poor Mr. Bennet. He's like hiding behind his newspaper. It shows what Austen does so well. The pressure on women to find a secure future and how they had to work a system that felt totally unfair. It's something we can still relate to even now.
Right. I mean, we're not all trying to marry lords and get estates anymore, but that pressure to succeed, to have security, it's something we all feel.
Absolutely. And where else to see this play out than at a ball? Because really the drama starts at that first ball.
Oh yeah, the ball. First impressions are everything. Everyone's checking each other out based on how they look and what people are whispering. It's like Jane Austen's version of a dating app, but with way better outfits. We see Jane, the oldest Bennet sister, totally charming Mr. Bingley. He's smitten. She's lovely. Mrs. Bennet is practically picking out china patterns.
And Jane, sweet Jane, she seems to really like him too. It's like a classic Austen romance, don't you think? But it's never that simple, is it? Especially when Elizabeth, our super smart main character, shows up.
Because Elizabeth is not buying it. Especially not with Mr. Darcy. He's handsome, he's rich, and he has this way about him that just screams, stay away.
Don't forget that awful line Darcy says about Elizabeth. She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me. Talk about a terrible first impression.
Ouch. You just know that line is going to bite him later. But that's Darcy right. So proud, thinks he's better than everyone. It's like he can't help but look down on everyone.
It's interesting, though, because Austen gives us a little peek into Darcy's head. When he's with Bingley, we see that he's not just being arrogant. It's how he was raised, who he hangs out with. He's reserved, sure, but you get the feeling he could have deep feelings.
Which makes things with Elizabeth even more interesting. She sees right through his act. She thinks he's uptight and rude, and he thinks she's nobody. Talk about a recipe for disaster.
And that's Austen's genius, isn't it? She takes these things that seem simple, a party, a conversation, a misunderstanding, and uses them to look at these huge ideas, pride, prejudice, and how we judge people based on what we see.
It's like she's showing us how messed up people can be, how we get blinded by our own opinions.
Exactly. And just when you think things couldn't get more complicated, guess who shows up? Mr. Wickham, charming, handsome, and with a sad story that would make anyone cry. He's like a walking red flag, but everyone's too distracted to notice.
Wickham. He's such a pro at manipulating people, telling everyone these stories about how mean Darcy is, making himself out to be the victim. And Elizabeth, who already doesn't like Darcy, believes it all.
Well, yeah. He's telling her exactly what she wants to hear about Darcy. It's like textbook confirmation bias. And Austen uses that to show how powerful lying can be.
And Elizabeth has no idea. She's walking right into his trap.
And as if things couldn't get more complicated for Elizabeth, right? She gets hit with not one, but 2 awkward proposals. Starting with Mr. Collins. Talk about horror.
Mr. Collins, he is like Austen at her funniest. He's so full of himself, thinks he's God's gift to women.
Yeah.
And he is completely clueless. It's painful, but also hilarious.
Totally. And that proposal to Elizabeth, I mean, it's legendary. He acts like he's choosing a new horse, not asking someone to marry him. So transactional.
Yeah.
No idea what he's actually doing.
But the best part is how Elizabeth handles it. She's not afraid to tell him off to say no, even though that's like a huge deal in their society. It's a really powerful moment for her.
And it's important to remember we might laugh at Mr. Collins, but he's a real threat to women back then. He's got money and the law on his side. Rejecting him was a huge risk.
And she takes that risk, which
Yeah.
makes it even crazier when Charlotte says yes to him. Elizabeth turns down this ridiculous but, like, safe offer, and her best friend Charlotte marries him. I mean, what?
Charlotte's choice reminds us that Pride and Prejudice isn't just a cute romance. It's about society. Charlotte's older. She's practical. She gets that her options are limited. Marrying Collins isn't love, but it's security. It's a way to move up in the world.
It makes you think about how even smart, capable women had to make really tough choices in a system that didn't really care about their happiness.
Exactly. And if you think the Bennett family drama can't get any more intense, bam, we get Darcy's first proposal.
Oh, man. That proposal needed a whole bucket of water to put it out. He's not just awkward and unromantic. He can't even say, I love you without insulting her and her family.
Remember that line? In vain have I struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you. He means it, but it comes off so condescending.
It's like he's saying, I love you, but you're so beneath me. It's amazing I'm even doing this. Of course Elizabeth leans into him.
And she really goes for it. She unloads months of frustration. Wickham's lies, her own issues with Darcy. It's a turning point. You can feel it. All that stuff under the surface is right there.
And just when you think Darcy can't make it worse, he does that letter.
Oh, the letter. Now things get good. We only get bits and pieces here, but you see how it affects Elizabeth?
Darcy tries to clear his name to show Wickham's a liar and explain himself. But he also shows a vulnerable side we haven't seen before. It's like a crack in his armor of pride, and Elizabeth is totally thrown off.
She has to think maybe she was wrong about him. She's so quick to judge based on what she sees, her own cleverness. But what if she got it all wrong?
That's a lot to think about. And just when Elizabeth is dealing with all that, the Bennets have a scandal that rocks their world.
Because Lydia, the youngest Bennet sister, the one always flirting and causing a stir, she runs off with Mr. Wickham.
Talk about a disaster waiting to happen. Lydia's obsessed with soldiers, and Wickham knows how to play her like a fiddle.
And remember, a woman's reputation was everything back then. Lydia running off isn't just gossip. It could ruin her sister's chances of getting married.
Mrs. Bennet goes totally bonkers, and Mr. Bennet finally seems to get how bad this is.
Even he can't hide behind his jokes anymore. He has to deal with being a hands-off dad and the mess Lydia's made.
The whole family is freaking out, trying to fix things. It seems hopeless. And then a letter arrives from Mr. Gardiner, Elizabeth's uncle.
The voice of reason. Mr. Gardiner, the practical one. He's been in London looking for them. And what he finds is both surprising and also not surprising at all.
So they find Lydia and Wickham in London, no wedding ring in sight, and Wickham's not planning on changing that.
Classic Wickham, am I right?
Unfortunately, yeah. He'd rather run from his debts than do the right thing by Lydia. But then Mr. Gardiner drops a bomb. Darcy's involved.
Hold on, Darcy. The guy who can't even look at the Bennets without making a face, who practically proposed to Elizabeth while insulting her entire family, he's the hero. He's the one who makes sure Wickham marries Lydia, pays off his debts, and saves their reputation. It's crazy, right? And it totally throws Elizabeth off. Why would Darcy do all that for a family he supposedly hates?
It's like he wandered in from a different story.
It really shows you who Darcy is. He's not doing it for attention. In fact, he tries to keep it a secret. This is about something more. His feelings for Elizabeth and trying to make up for his mistakes.
You start to see his awkwardness differently. Maybe he's not arrogant, just terrible at showing his feelings.
And remember that letter. He knows he messed up, and he's trying to do better. And how better to show that than by saving the woman he loves from a scandal that could ruin her family?
But as if planning a secret wedding wasn't enough, Darcy comes back to Longbourn with Bingley. He's like a fairy godmother of second chances, but less sparkles, more brooding.
This is Darcy 2.0. He's more open, more thoughtful, and surprisingly good at handling Mrs. Bennet's matchmaking. It's clear he wants to fix things, not just for Lydia, but Jane and Bingley too.
And Bingley, with a little nudge from Darcy and no interference from his sister, he finally proposes to Jane. Thank goodness. They've been through so much. It's great to see them get their happy ending.
It shows you real love can survive anything, even the worst misunderstandings.
Yeah.
But let's be real. We all want to know about Elizabeth and Darcy. That will they, won't they couple.
Right. You can feel the tension. Will Darcy take another chance? Will Elizabeth get over her prejudices and see the real him?
Just when you think they might actually have a shot, Austen throws in Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Oh boy! Lady Catherine Darcy's scary aunt. She shows up like she's about to conquer Longbourn, determined to stop Darcy from marrying Elizabeth.
Lady Catherine is like the embodiment of everything they're trying to overcome. Pride, prejudice, and those stifling social rules. She could have ruined everything, but it backfires in the best way.
It's like she accidentally gives them something to fight together, which makes them face their feelings.
Right. Lady Catherine, trying to control everything, actually gives Elizabeth and Darcy the push to take control themselves. They both stand up to her. They won't be controlled by her.
We don't see the whole proposal, but you can feel it's different. It's not about what society says or grand gestures. It's about two people who face their flaws and came out stronger.
And Elizabeth saying yes. It's not just about love. It's about choosing to see the good in someone, even when it means changing your own mind.
It's such a great moment, not just for Darcy, but Elizabeth too. They've both grown so much, and their happiness feels so real.
And those glimpses of their future. Darcy's not so serious anymore. Elizabeth brings her smarts and humor to Pemberley. Even Lady Catherine comes around. It shows you what love and understanding can do.
It's the perfect ending to a story that still matters today. You know what? I think I'm going to grab the full book after this and just dive back in.
You definitely should. But
Yeah.
before you go, I'm curious what really stuck with you from all of this. Why do we still love Pride and Prejudice after all this time?